Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So I think by this point we've all kind of heard about the insane value that Xbox Game Pass is. It's the quote-unquote best deal in gaming. And well, it's one thing hearing that, but now some numbers have been revealed that truly reveals just how insane Xbox Game Pass is. To put it short, it's absolutely crazy, but we will get into much more detail later in the video. Now, I also do have some good news for you PlayStation Plus subscribers out there, as not only did the January lineup leak out online, but it does also look like a big game that released into the service earlier this year is getting a little bit of a bonus today, so we'll get into that one as well. To get things started off, though, we're actually going to talk about something that I do consider to be incredibly exciting and quite cool that I even get to talk about this on the channel at all, and that is that the best-selling fantasy and sci-fi author Brandon Sanderson is working on a video game. Now, this is something that I don't really get to talk about on the channel very often, but I do like to read, and Brandon Sanderson is one of, if not my very favorite author ever. He does such an incredible job with all of the different books that he makes, and this guy is an absolute machine, let me tell you. This isn't some George R.R. Martin or Patrick Rothfuss that takes like 10 years to write a book. No, Brandon Sanderson consistently puts out books on a regular basis, and also really high quality ones at that. I mean, this is the author behind Mistborn. You have Stormlight Archive. He's working on a Skyward series. He's done Elantris, Warbreaker, and the list just kind of goes on and on. This guy is an absolute machine. So I do think it's really exciting to see that he is working on some kind of video game, though he did reveal here that it's not for one of his already established IP. That might be a little unfortunate for some fans out there, considering some of his games would actually translate really well into a video game, especially with something like Mistborn. And that's because of his unique magic systems within his books. But something else that he did say here is that he's been working on this game for several years now with a company that many of us will have apparently have heard of, though he does say that it's probably not the one that we're thinking about, nor the other one either. Whatever that means, I'm not exactly sure, but it does look like this is going to be developed by a well-known studio. Now, this is one of those topics that I know is going to be kind of interesting, just in the sense that some of you all probably have no idea who Brandon Sanderson is, but those who do read and has read his stuff before might actually be really excited about this. He really is one of the best fantasy authors in general, so I think this is a game that we might want to pay attention to, and hopefully we get an official announcement for this sooner rather than later. Now, I also got some really good news for fans of Bravely Default, as it's now official that Bravely Default 2 has eclipsed 1 million units sold. And this is fantastic news, as not only has this game been a success, but this kind of assures that there's a good chance that we will see a continuation of the Bravely Default franchise. See, earlier this year, the Bravely Default team did express interest in making a third Bravely Default game, or I guess technically it would be the fourth one, but nonetheless, if you take a look at this quote, this is what they had to say. Bravely Default 2 was well received by fans, and as a result, we're hoping to continue the series as we feel we can pull it off once again. With that said, we're still in the planning phase, and I suspect development will take another 3 to 4 years, so we'd appreciate if fans could bear with us. So they have already expressed interest in making a Bravely Default 3, and now that we've seen that it has been a success and how many units it's sold, if there was ever a question or any kind of concern on whether or not we'd get a third game, the chances of that happening has now definitely increased. And I do think that this is great, especially for fans of that classic Final Fantasy experience. I mean, Bravely Default essentially is a Final Fantasy game without the name, and in fact, that first game was developed as a Final Fantasy game, and then they eventually decided to make it its own IP. Nonetheless, though, with Final Fantasy going more into that action-driven experience, it is great to have this more classic Final Fantasy formula here in Bravely Default. So I think that both these franchises can coexist with one another, and as we're seeing right here, there are a lot of fans out there wanting this exact experience. Let's go ahead and talk about Xbox Game Pass here for a moment, though, because, like I said before, I think we kind of all know that Xbox Game Pass is this just absolutely insane deal in gaming. I think we can all agree on that much. But I guess the loadout decided to look a little bit more into just what an entire year is worth for Xbox Game Pass. So basically, Xbox Game Pass for consoles is $120 a year, or if you want the PC version, that's $120 a year, or instead you can get Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which is $180 a year. But what does that actually get you? Well, the loadout decided to just look at the games added in 2021. Keep in mind, this is not the entire library of Xbox Game Pass, but how much did the additions that came out in 2021 add in value for Xbox Game Pass? And yeah, let's just check this out. So they say, we have done some calculations based on all the additions to the PC and console libraries of Xbox Game Pass and found that the total of everything added to the service in 2021 to be $6,317.35. This number is based on the base price of each game on the Microsoft Store. Yeah, that is absolutely insane. And what is crazy is that they also looked into what month was the most valuable. And you can actually see back in March, just one single month, they offered $964.67 worth in value. That's the month that all of those Bethesda games came over to Xbox Game Pass. But yes, this is why people just go crazy over this service. It really just saves you so much money. I mean, you take a look at just the last couple months. You had games like Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite. Both of these games launched day one into Xbox Game Pass. These are big AAA blockbuster games. And I mean, if you were an Xbox Game Pass subscriber, you was able to play those games at no additional cost. Those two games alone are valued at $120, and if all you have is Xbox Game Pass, that paid for the service right away, and that doesn't even include all the other games that just comes to the service every single month. And I mean, it does go beyond that as well, because you can add value to the service, but that would really mean nothing if it wasn't also high quality. But one thing that we have seen with Xbox Game Pass is they're able to really do both. Again, take a look at Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite, which were Game of the Year candidates. Halo Infinite has been running away with the fan votes for the Game of the Year, and then you also have Forza Horizon 5, which was the highest rated game of the year. And then you have games like Psychonauts 2 that came into service day one. You had Flight Simulator released into the service this year. Hades, that is a phenomenal independent game. That was the Game of the Year for 2020. It Takes Two is an Xbox Game Pass as well. That is yet another Game of the Year candidate. So, I mean, when you kind of look at the list here, you have Forza Horizon 5, Halo Infinite, Psychonauts 2, you have It Takes Two. That's 4 of the Game of the Year candidates all available in Xbox Game Pass for 2021. And then you have the 2020 Game of the Year candidate as well in Hades. Yeah, that is very telling on some of the high quality games that they get in Xbox Game Pass. And it just seems like on a monthly basis, they always give you at least something interesting to play. Sometimes these might be smaller games that you might not have heard of before, but you have now, and then a lot of times they do end up being quite a lot of fun. Now, not all of these games will end up being perfect, but a lot of them are a lot of fun. And when you combine that sense of discovery with some of these smaller independent games with their day one AAA blockbuster first-party games, it's just crazy value, and I really don't think that you can argue with that by this point. They're just doing such a phenomenal job with Xbox Game Pass, and I think that this clearly shows you just how good of a deal Xbox Game Pass truly is. Again, $6,300 of value was added to Xbox Game Pass in 2021 alone. Now, we do also have a PlayStation subscription to talk about today, being PlayStation Plus, and a few things here are actually happening. One being that the January lineup did leak out online. This is coming from the same person that has leaked out the September, October, and November lineups all correctly. So this more than likely is going to be correct as well, but let's just go and take a look at the games that leaked out online. This includes Deep Rock Galactic, Dirt 5, and then Persona 5 Strikers. And this is actually a pretty good lineup of games here. It does seem like that they're going to have a strong start to 2022, as all 3 of these games, they're high-quality experiences. You do have Deep Rock Galactic here, which is a bit of a hidden gem in general. This is actually a really good cooperative shooter. This is actually a really good one that's been available on Xbox Game Pass for a while, and I'm really glad to see it come over here to PlayStation Plus so even more people can see just how good this game actually is. So if you do enjoy cooperative experiences, definitely check out Deep Rock Galactic. Then of course you have Dirt 5, which is a pretty good racing game that launched side by side with the PlayStation 5, and then Persona 5 Strikers. I don't know how well this game has performed compared to Persona 5, but just knowing how popular Persona 5 is, it's cool to see this one come over to PlayStation Plus, so a lot of fans can kind of check this one out as well. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid lineup and a great way to start 2022, but there's actually a little bit of a bonus happening here as well. Now, this one's kind of odd, but definitely good news to say the least. So if you remember right, back in March, Final Fantasy VII Remake was one of the PlayStation Plus games, which, that is excellent and everything, but at the same time, there was a little bit of a controversy surrounding this entry, and that's because this was the PlayStation 4 version, and that they were not going to offer an upgrade to the PlayStation 5 version. Now, keep in mind, if you purchase this game on the PlayStation 4, it then would have a free upgrade to that PlayStation 5 version. It was a little bit of a controversial decision at the time, and a lot of fans just were not happy about this at all, but it does look like Square Enix has backtracked on this now, because as of today, fans who claim that Final Fantasy Remake version on PlayStation Plus will now officially be able to upgrade to Final Fantasy Remake for the PlayStation 5 completely free of charge. Now, keep in mind that this does not include the Intergrade DLC with Yuffie. If you want that, you're going to have to buy it separately. However, as of this moment, that DLC will be 25% off for a limited amount of time. Nonetheless, though, this is fantastic news for PlayStation Plus subscribers and those who claimed that PlayStation 4 version back in March. Yeah, it's a little late and everything, and I would have liked to have seen them do this sooner, because I know some people would have probably already upgraded by this point, but if you haven't, you will be able to do that now. The PlayStation 5 upgrade will, of course, include things like 4K resolution. It has a performance mode with 60 frames per second, faster load times, and then that haptic feedback on the DualSense controller, among other improvements. So if you haven't already got that upgrade, definitely do so. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a great game, and it really is a beautiful game as well. Let's go and move on over to the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, what is the best first-party Nintendo game that released in 2021? And I think overall, Nintendo had a really good year with their exclusives, whether that be Monster Hunter Rise. They had games like Bravely Default 2, which we talked about earlier in the video. But in terms of their first-party games, what was your favorite? And as we take a look here, the runaway winner was Metroid Dread with 61% of the votes. Second place was a tie between Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, then Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury at 12% apiece, and then you had Zelda Skyward Sword HD at 9%, and then at the bottom was Mario Party Superstars with 6%. And right away, I just want to say how cool it is to see Metroid Dread win here, being Nintendo's best first-party game of 2021. This has just been such an underutilized and underappreciated franchise for such a long time, and I really feel like this was its big breakout release. It just seems like more fans than ever have been talking about Metroid and really have jumped into this franchise for the first time, and I just love seeing this game get the recognition that it truly deserves. Other than that, though, I mean, one thing that you kind of see with this list is that Nintendo did do a lot of different remakes and remasters this year. I couldn't include every game on this list. I mean, they did also release games like New Pokemon Snap as well as WarioWare, but it seems like a lot of their high-profile releases this year was remakes or remasters. Now, granted, these were very good remakes and remasters. I loved Zelda Skyward Sword as an example. I think that was an amazing game, and I'm really enjoying Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl as well. For that matter, Bowser's Fury, that did have some new content, and it's an excellent 3D platformer overall. So even though they did do a lot of remakes and remasters for the year of 2021, they were really good, and I feel like a lot of these games were maybe games that fans did miss out on in the past. So for a lot of people, these games were still new in a sense. Technicality and everything, but as we mentioned yesterday, it already is starting to look like 2022 is going to be yet another really good year for the Nintendo Switch. Of course, Pokemon Legends Arceus releases next month in January, Splatoon 3 is around the corner, and then we, of course, have Zelda Breath of the Wild at the end of the year. Oh, and I can't forget about Kirby and the Forgotten Land as well. That one is looking quite good so far. But as you can clearly see here, it is already starting to look like Nintendo is going to have another good year in 2022. And for those that are wanting a little bit more than remakes and remasters, it looks like 2022 will be that year. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.